Hey guys, Rob here, and today you join me for episode 34 of How It Was Made. And yes, we have another Ferrari 333 SP model. Now I really love these Ferrari racing cars, and I wanted to add a model version of this real car, which is the yellow shell MOMO version. I just find these cars fascinating, and they've just got a glorious V12 engine sound. So for this model I'm going to be using a Hot Wheels Elite 333 SP model. I've also got a set of gold BBS wire wheels from a GT Spirit model, and luckily for me the decal sheet is available from TaylorMade Decals. So first step, break the model down. So pretty easy with these models, they come apart very easy, there's not that many pieces. And first step is to strip all the paint off the body. Now I've got a tutorial on the how-to playlist of how I strip paint off these die-cast models, so you can follow that if you're interested. Now next step was to add a knacker duct into the rear clamshell. Now this actually feeds air to a transmission cooler, which I'll be adding later on to the build. The front of the model also has a squared off air opening, so those little ears have to be removed. And this particular model actually has a side air duct. So just by scaling off the picture in the background that I'm using reference for, I can work out the shape of the cutouts. Now those rear pins have to be removed in the back. They were just for securing the model into its base during shipping, so they weren't needed. And when I do a cutout, I start with holes in each corners, and then I can then use my Dremel with a cut-off wheel and then join the dots, or join the drill holes, so to speak, to cut the shape out. I will then sand the metal a little bit and also sand the resin to make the part fit tight. Again, I use the cut-off wheel to open up the slots in the back, and I cut off those inner ears in that front air dam. Here you can see I've cut out the shape with the Dremel, and then I go over it with a file, a round file for the corners and just a flat file for the square edges, and file everything up to its final shape. Just test fitting the rear clam with the air scoop on the body here to make sure that it doesn't foul any of the suspension. I just had to sand a little bit off the bottom of that resin air scoop just to make it fit, so that's all good to go. I used some super glue to glue the resin to the die cast metal, which works well, and then I used some Tamiya finishing putty just to fill in the gaps between. I did that the same on the rear as well, as I overcut the slots there, so I just added some more putty. Next step, I had to grind away that bottom sill extension that wasn't there on the real yellow car, so I ground that away with the Dremel and then smoothed the face of the metalwork so that it was nice and smooth. Next I had to construct the inner air scoop, so I make some templates out of card always, make sure they fit, then I can transfer them onto some 1mm styrene sheet, and then again I use super glue to glue that styrene sheet into the metal body. Again, a piece of card to work out the vertical face as that's curved. I can then transfer that onto some styrene sheet and then glue that in place as well with super glue. Now that will form a really strong bond, and to make sure that the scoop on the other side is exactly the same, I'll make a template, as you see here, of the air scoop on the finish side, flip it over and use it and mark the inside edge of the other one, so that way you're guaranteed that both air scoops are exactly the same dimension. Then using a file, I'll just file away any little transition edge between the metal and the styrene sheet, and I applied quite a lot of Tamiya putty on the side here, as there are a lot of little scratches from the file. Next I thought I'd tackle the racing seat. Now this is red in the real car, so I wanted to remove all the flocking, and a little hint, you can use the product Goo Gone, that will dissolve all the flocking and easy to remove it with your fingernail. I then used some white Tamiya primer to prime the plastic part before I added the red flocking powder. Now I use enamel paints because they dry slower, so I just hand painted the entire seat in Tamiya red enamel, and then sprinkled the flocking powder on the wet red enamel paint. Once that was dry, I fitted the seat belts back onto the seat and fitted it back into the model. Next, I had to make some fake radiators, so I just used some radiator photo etch mesh, stuck onto a piece of styrene sheet and sprayed them silver. Now these will sit in behind the side air ducts like so. The putty had dried now, so I could start sanding that away and getting it nice and smooth before I did a final 2K undercoat on the body. Tried to fill up some of the scratches on the other side as well, and here you can see all the putty is sanded off, just leaving little bits of putty in the deep scratches. Now it does look like it's scratched still, but it's quite fine. But before I prime it, I'll just spray some grey Tamiya primer on there. That will highlight any little areas that I have to refill, and I go back with a second application of Tamiya filler to fill any of those areas. When that's sanded back, I will prime it again just to make sure that I'm happy with the finish, and then I can basically just have a final little quick assembly there to see what it'll look like, and then go from there. Now, this is where the fun begins. These wheels are off the GT Spirit Koenig F50. Now the front ones are great, but the rear ones don't have enough dish. So I'm using my new Dremel workstation that I reviewed quite a few videos back. I fitted the saw attachment, the saw blade, and I was able to cut the top ring off the GT Spirit wheels, and they will be glued onto the Hot Wheels Elite rims. I then did the same and cut away the back, and what I was left with was just the BBS centers. Now these are going to be glued into the wheel barrels of the Hot Wheels Elite. The white Hot Wheels Elite wheels had the spokes cut out of the centers of them. I flipped them over in reverse because the rear had more dish, and then as you can see there on the right, the BBS wheel center is slipped into the Hot Wheels Elite wheel barrel. Now this created a very deep dish BBS wheel for the back. A little bit too much, so I used some 3mm wide styrene sheet, wrapped it round in a tight circle and glued that into the wheel barrel so that they weren't quite as deep dish. I then masked up the outside of those wheels and resprayed the gold finish. Again, some grey primer on the new wheel barrels to show any cracks, and I had to add a little bit of filler to fill those little joins. So that is going to be the way to create the new deep dish rear wheels. The body then was sprayed in 2K undercoat, and while that was drying I moved on to some other things. Now I needed to make a little transmission cooler for the back, so this is just a plastic radiator that I found in my parts box. I trimmed it down, cut it into two halves, and then glued those two halves together to make a little oil cooler. Just checking the rims here again before I go much further. I have added putty into the join where I joined the lip on there, and while that was drying I painted the body in Giallo Moderna genuine Ferrari automotive paint. A couple of coats of clear coat on there as well. Came out really well. When that was dry, I masked up the body because the front window canopy needed to go black. Now after I apply the decals, as you see here, these are all made by Tailor Made Decals. I'll put a link in the description to his website, and this still needs a couple of coats of clear to lock all those decals in, and then that will turn that black windscreen gloss as well. So yeah, really happy with that decal sheet. I think it looks a very unique 333 race car. Now, as the sills were modified on the die-cast body, the side sill here in plastic was visible, so I added some carbon fibre decal, and here is the newly finished wheels. So a good trick here, if you want a good chrome finish, you can actually airbrush Molotow liquid chrome pen paint. I'll do another video on that topic specifically, but it's a really good way of replicating chrome wheels. As you can see there, they look quite reflective. Not quite as good as electroplated plastic parts, but pretty good. Once that had dried, I fitted the tyres back onto the wheels and they were good to go. Now I clear coated all the carbon fibre parts on the chassis, and this is just the standard carbon fibre rear wing off the Hot Wheels model, just with a clear coat added, and it brought it up $1 million. Now this is the final coats of clear on the painted and decaled body. Really happy with how that came out. I love Ferrari Giallo Moderna, it just has such a great pop. It's a really bright yellow. And just started reassembling of the chassis, so the wheels were now fitted back onto the chassis. The yellow rollover hoop had the headrest bar glued into it, and the rear wing was just temporarily screwed back on. Now time to assemble the body. So first step is to black out all the underside areas that may be seen through the wheel wells. Fuel filler caps glued back on. The headlights were glued back in, and then I used a small paintbrush and painted the backside of the fender louvers to make them look like they were open. I then added my little fake radiators in the back of the new side air vents that I made. I then glued the side roll bars on, which had the windows and mirrors integrated, and then I glued on the headlight lenses as well. Now I use micro scale crystal clear for all clear parts now. Fantastic product. Floor was then screwed back on. I still leave the tape on those headlight lenses just so that they've got plenty of time to dry, and screwed the body back onto the chassis. A couple of little bars had to be re-glued back in here because they fell off during disassembly, and the rear wing actually has a silver top flap on it, so I masked the wing up, painted that just with Tamiya spray can. I did the same with the side end plates as well, and sprayed those silver too to match pictures of the real car. So the wing was then screwed back onto the model. You can see the back picture there where they're silver, and tape removed from the lenses on the front, and they've dried beautifully in place. I then glued all the other little accessories on, the little fine metal clips, and this is my little transmission cooler that I made out of spare parts, and these little AN race fittings are available from Top Studio, and they were just glued onto that transmission cooler, and then I used some of their 1mm braided line and made some lines that ran down to the oil cooler. So I'll leave some links in the description as well for those little anodized hoses and fittings. They're great. And yeah, a few other little bits and pieces to finish it off. Mounted it onto the BBR leather base, and that is basically the model completed. So this will be another great one in the collection. As I said, I really love these cars. I'm really happy with the way this model turned out. As I said, the model only cost $80, the standard model, around $50 Australian for the decal sheet, and a little bit of time and paint and a BBR case. So really this model did not cost me that much to build, but I think it's a stunning looking race car, if you're into your Ferrari race cars, that is anyway. So yeah, overall really happy with the way the model came out, and that will probably be the last 333 SP race car that I build, but never say never. I may build another one in the future. There are a few different specs that I really like, but here is some pics of my 3 Ferrari 333 SP race cars all together. I love them, and yeah, they'll be staying in the collection for quite some time. But I hope you enjoyed today's How It Was Made episode. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Smash that like button if you like the video. And until next time, thanks for watching Rob's Model Cars.